You ever wonder why some people come back different after summer camp? Yeah, these stories might explain it. But before we dive in, welcome to Third Sight Cases, the channel where creepy meets cozy. I know a lot of you'll listen to these stories while winding down or trying to sleep, and I'm here to help you with both. So hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and drop a comment where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I don't usually tell this story unless someone brings up Avalanche Creek. Even then, I keep it short. But since we're already swapping end-of-summer horror stories, so screw it. I'll tell you what happened. This was July last year, right at the tail end of our annual camp trip in Glacier National Park. We were a group of 6, all friends from college who'd promised we'd do a summer reunion every year. That year, we picked Avalanche Campground. It's up in Montana, right off Going to the Sun Road. Real scenic place. Avalanche Lake Trail is one of the park's most popular hikes. And yeah, the view's unreal. But so is the current running through Avalanche Creek, especially when the snowmelt kicks in hard midsummer. I'm not a hardcore outdoors guy or anything, but I'm not clueless either. I've done my fair share of hikes and paddled canoes before. Same with my buddy Jay. He was the type who bought gear he didn't need just to flex on REI employees. That's the guy I ended up going out on the water with. We thought we'd take the canoe out one last time on our last night, just a quick cruise at sunset, soak it all in. But realizing it now, it was a big mistake. We were camped a little upstream from where a guy fell earlier that month. I think it was Sidon Patil. You probably saw that story if you keep up with park accidents. He was 26, slipped off a rock into Avalanche Creek, and disappeared into the gorge. Rangers looked for weeks, but he was just gone. They didn't find his body till August, like a month later, way downstream. The current's no joke up there. Most people don't realize it looks chill on the surface, but there's insane underflow from the snowmelt and rain runoff. I remember we were all talking about that story over breakfast the day we arrived. Felt kinda eerie. His fall happened just a couple weeks before we got there. A ranger even warned us to stay clear of the log jams and fast-moving water. Thing is, we listened until we didn't. On our last night, it was just me and Jay who were still up. Everyone else had turned in early, and we were buzzed but not drunk. Just one of those moods where everything feels like a good idea. The lake was quiet, almost too quiet. Clouds were starting to gather way off in the distance, but it didn't seem urgent. Not yet. We grabbed the canoe and headed out. No life vests, because we were idiots. Just one paddle each and a small headlamp Jay clipped to his hat. We weren't going far, just around the bend. It's weird looking back now, because there were so many little moments that should have made us turn around. That should have been the end of it. Like how the canoe immediately rocked harder than usual when we pushed off, or how the water didn't have that soft ripple anymore. It was pulling a little, just enough to make you think you were imagining it. We told ourselves it was fine. The first 10 minutes out on the water felt almost peaceful. Almost. We weren't talking much, just listening to the canoe creaked with each stroke, and watching the shore slowly blur into shadow. The sun had dipped below the trees, but there was still that bluish tint in the sky. Jay started whistling some dumb tune, and I remember laughing at how off-key it was. Like I said, the mood was good, and vibe was chill. Then we lost a paddle. It was Jay's specifically. He rested it across his lap for a second while digging something out of his pocket, and the thing just slid off. No splash, no dramatic sound, just a quick bloop and it was gone, He tried reaching for it, but it drifted out of sight like it was being pulled by something. I tossed mine to him without thinking, figured we could both take turns using it. But then the wind picked up out of nowhere. It wasn't even the kind of wind that feels like air moving. It felt like something was trying to push us, like shoving us. The water went from still to choppy in under a minute, and we started spinning sideways. That's when I realized we weren't moving in the direction we thought we were. The current had started dragging us downstream, fast. Jay tried paddling on one side to straighten us out, but we kept turning. And then the first thunder cracked. Loud, deep, not super close, but close enough. We were half a mile from the campsite, with nothing but thick woods around. The flashlight on Jay's hat flickered once, then died. We were screwed. You know that thing your brain does when it realizes you messed up badly? Like no more little chances to fix it. You're in it now. That's where we were. I was using my hands to try and paddle against the current, while Jay crouched low, yelling something I couldn't even hear over the wind. I think we both knew we had maybe 5 minutes before this turned into something worse. I spotted the logjam right after the second flash of lightning. Giant mess of downed trees, branches, and God knows what crammed across the far bend of the creek. The current was pulling us straight toward it. And when I say pulling, I mean yanking. Like the canoe wasn't even ours anymore. Then, we hit the logjam sideways. It was instant chaos. 1 second we were upright, the next we were flipped. We're underwater, and everything was cold and violent. I remember my chest slamming into something hard, maybe the side of the canoe, and my body being pulled deeper. I couldn't see anything, just black water and debris. My legs hit something that felt like a net of branches, and I started kicking like crazy. I got one arm up and clawed at what I hoped was the surface. I popped up for maybe 2 seconds, enough to take in a mouthful of air and hear Jay screaming. Then the current dragged me under again, this time under the jam. It was like being stuffed into a garbage disposal, no space to move. Just pitch black, sharp limbs, and the sound of water forcing its way into every hole in your face. I don't know how I didn't black out. I started pushing against everything, trying to find the surface again. My hands scraped raw. My shirt tore on something, and I felt it drag behind me. Then I saw light. I don't know if it was moonlight or lightning flashing above the water, but it gave me enough to push one last time toward an opening between logs. I got my head through and sucked in the air like it owed me money. I held onto one of the logs and coughed up everything inside me. But no sign of Jay, just thunder, and the creek, angry as hell. I must have hung onto that log for a solid 5 minutes before I could even think about moving. Everything was sore. My lungs burned, my ears were ringing, and my hands felt like they'd been dragged across sandpaper. I kept looking around, waiting for Jay to pop up, but still nothing. Just dark water rushing past and the storm getting louder. I pulled myself up enough to wedge into a tangle of branches. It wasn't stable, but at least I wasn't in the water anymore. I started yelling Jay's name over and over until my voice cracked, but still nothing. Then I saw him. A flash of lightning lit up the creek, and there he was, barely visible, clinging to a half-submerged log, maybe 10 feet away. His head kept bobbing in and out of the water. He was alive, but barely holding on. I don't even remember thinking. I just started moving toward him, inch by inch across the slick timber. Every push felt like it was going to be my last. My arms were shaking so bad I thought I'd slip right off and get sucked under again. I got close enough to stretch one hand out toward him, yelling his name through the rain. But he didn't answer, just stared at me with this wide-eyed panic, like he didn't know if I was real. I grabbed his wrist, slippery as hell, and the first pull almost lost him. Second one got him a little higher onto the log, but he started slipping again. He was too weak to help much, just gasping and kicking. I planted one knee against the thickest log I could find, anchored myself, and gave one last full body pull. He flopped onto the tangle of branches like a dead fish. He didn't even speak, and just lay there coughing and choking, trying to catch his breath. I stayed locked onto him, my hand still gripping his jacket like I was scared he'd disappear again. We stayed like that, sprawled across the jam, not saying a word while the rain kept pounding down. It took us a while to even try moving. Eventually, we spotted the bank, steep, muddy, covered in brush. But it was land. We took turns crawling, pushing each other forward. Every few feet we stopped to breathe or puke. When we finally hit solid ground, I collapsed, face first into the mud. Jay dropped beside me, still breathing, but barely. After a few minutes, he said something like, "I can taste blood in my mouth." Then he touched his forehead and winced hard. Even in the dark, I could see the smear of red on his fingers. Turned out he had a pretty deep gash on his head. Probably slammed into a log when we went under. Might have given him a concussion. No wonder he was so out of it. We didn't move for a long time, just lay there wrecked. We made it back to camp at dawn, around 3 or 4 a.m. Took hours of stumbling and half carrying each other through wet trails. Everyone was still asleep when we staggered in, looking like two ghosts. We banged on the nearest tent until someone unzipped it, confused and half awake. The second they saw Jay's face and the blood down his cheek, they snapped out of it. We asked them to call for help. Luckily, Jay had his first aid kit stashed in his pack under the tarp. One of the guys cleaned his gash the best he could, while someone else wrapped it up with gauze and tape. We were freezing, soaked, and barely coherent, but people kicked into gear fast. 2 of them, Matt and Riley, both in way better shape than us, threw on jackets and trail ran to the ranger station about 1.5 miles away. No cell service that deep, so that was the only option. Rangers showed up around 6 a.m. They took one look at Jay and said he needed to be checked out at a hospital. They helped load us into their service vehicle and drove us straight to Kalispell Regional Medical Center. Jay was barely speaking by then, drifting in and out, so I stayed with him while they checked him in. The rest of the group followed us out not long after. No one felt like camping anymore after that. We didn't talk much in the hospital, just sat there, listening to beeping machines and the occasional nurse check-in. The adrenaline was long gone. We were just hollow. Jay doesn't talk about it much. It's been a year since it happened. He'll joke sometimes, calls it our Olympic swim tryout. But there's something in his eyes when he says it, like a switch flips, that he still remembers, just like I do. I used to think summer camps were for nerds. Like the idea of bunk beds and group songs around a campfire sounded like the lamest thing ever. Especially in 2007, when I was 11 and fully locked into my PS2, obsessed with Tony Hawk's Underground, and trying to master kickflips in my driveway. My parents, on the other hand, had this romanticized obsession with getting fresh air and building character. So yeah, when they said I was going to a summer camp for the last 2 weeks of July, I was pissed. I begged them to skip the camp thing and just get me a PS3 instead. It had just come out, and all my friends were already hyping it like it was the second coming. But my parents hit me with the whole, "it's just gonna rot your brain" line, and told me I needed to go outside and make real memories. I remember thinking that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. There was this kids' summer camp in Pennsylvania. It's been around since forever, like since the 50s or something. And apparently, it was known for music, sports, art, all that classic camp brochure crap. I didn't care. I didn't want to go. I was fully prepared to fake food poisoning or throw a tantrum or something. Then I found out Madison was going. Madison was this girl from school I had the biggest crush on. Like full-on 11-year-old heart-thumping, sweaty palms crush. She was in the grade above me and barely knew I existed. But when I overheard she was signed up for the same summer camp, something in me flipped. Suddenly, summer camp didn't seem so bad. I convinced my parents to let me join at the last minute. Honestly, I was just hoping we'd end up in the same archery group or something, and I could impress her by not completely embarrassing myself. And turns out she was there. But she was surrounded by her own group, and we didn't really talk beyond a quick wave the entire time, which sucked. But I got over it pretty quick, because what I didn't expect was finding 3 of the best dudes I've ever met. Max, Tino, and Derek. We all got placed in the same bunk and clicked instantly. We have the same energy, same dumb jokes, same habit of sneaking Oreos from the kitchen. That summer ended up being one of the best times of my life, for real. We did everything: ziplining, canoe races, late-night ghost stories, prank wars, the works. We even carved our names into this giant tree near the edge of the lake like some kind of kid's version of the Goonies. I'm still tight with those guys today. So anyway, the weird part of the story didn't happen until the last night. The summer camp got this no night games rule. Like, once the sun's down, you're supposed to be in your cabin or at a supervised event. But we were 11, stupid, bored. So someone, I think it was Tino, suggested we play hide and seek in the woods after lights out. It sounded epic. Dangerous in the coolest way. We agreed we'd sneak out once our counselor started snoring. I don't know if it was the energy of it being the last night, or the fact we'd been hyping it up all day. But the second it hit around 11 p.m., we were buzzing. We tiptoed past sleeping bodies, slipped out the back door, and ran straight into the woods behind our cabin. It was pitch dark. The only light came from a weak little flashlight someone brought, and even that barely helped. But we were laughing our asses off, hyped up on sugar and adrenaline. We did a quick round to figure out boundaries and rules, then out of nowhere, Derek slapped Max on the shoulder and yelled, "You're it." Next thing you know, we all took off in every direction. No warning, no mercy. Poor Max didn't even get a chance to argue. I could still hear him grumbling about how it wasn't fair as I was booking it across the yard, trying not to laugh. I hid behind this old wooden fence post near a dried-out creek bed and covered by some thick bushes. I remember how quiet everything got, like too quiet, even for nighttime. And that's when things started getting weird. At first, I thought I was just freaking myself out. You know how when it's super quiet, your brain starts making up noises? I was in a crouched position, almost laying down in the ground, heart thumping, and trying not to breathe too loud. I heard twigs snapping, normal for the woods, right? But it sounded paced, like footsteps. I figured someone was trying to find me, which made sense. But what threw me off was how slow and steady it was. Then I heard the whisper, just a soft, drawn out, "Found you." I almost laughed because I thought it was Max or Tino screwing with me. So I whispered back, "Who's it?" And I heard, super faint, "You are." Still felt like a joke, but something in the tone of it made me freeze. It didn't sound like any of my friends. It wasn't playful. It sounded dry, like someone whispering from behind a wall. I stayed down and waited. After a few seconds, I heard someone shuffle past, maybe 8 or 9 feet away. No flashlight, just movement. And then it got quiet again. Dead quiet. Eventually, I heard someone calling from the other side of the woods. It was Tino's voice. He was yelling for me and Derek. I stood up and called back. Tino popped out from behind a tree and came running over, totally out of breath. Said he had been looking for us for like 20 minutes. I was hiding behind the old wooden fence post. I heard someone walk past me and whisper, "I thought it was you." That's when Tino told me he never came near my side of the woods. He was looking around near the trail. He spotted someone moving behind some bushes and between trees and thought it was me. We both just kind of laughed it off, but he definitely looked weirded out. I suggested we should just find them and head back. So we started calling for Max and Derek, but no response. We fanned out a little and kept shouting. Finally, we heard Max, way deeper into the woods than anyone was supposed to go. When we found him, he looked straight up pale, like dude looked spooked. Said he'd been walking in circles for like half an hour. Claimed he saw a small figure dart between trees, but figured it was just Derek being dumb. But when he tried to follow, he ended up totally lost. We were all kind of freaked out at this point, so we noped out and started heading back. That's when Derek finally showed up, completely casual, like nothing had happened. He said he went to hide, and then just sat in one spot until he got bored, then waited by the edge of the woods for us. But here's the thing. When we asked him if he whispered to anyone, he just blinked and went, "What whisper?" That's when my stomach dropped, because I looked at Max and Tino and realized none of us had been near each other the whole game. And yet, someone whispered to me, responded to me. We got back to the cabin and didn't say much, just quietly climbed into bed like nothing happened. But I swear, I couldn't sleep. I just laid there staring at the ceiling. And then it hit me. The whisper said, "Found you," before I even moved, before I even breathed. Like they already knew exactly where I was. No way anyone could have found me. I was tucked deep and was covered with thick bushes. Total blackout out there too. You'd need a freaking flashlight just to see your own hand. But the worst part? I just realized how close that whisper was to my ear. Like someone was squatting there, crouched down right beside me the whole damn time. The next morning had this weird tension in the air. You know how after a fun night, you usually wake up kinda hyped and talk about it all over breakfast? Yeah, none of that. We were quiet, weirdly quiet, like we'd all collectively agreed not to bring it up. I remember Max didn't even touch his pancakes, which for him was like a red flag. Tino just kept looking out the mess hall window. And Derek, who normally wouldn't shut up, barely said anything. I was trying to act normal, but every time I looked at the woods, I got that same heavy feeling in my chest. We had one more day before parents were supposed to pick us up. We were scheduled for a scavenger hunt and some cabin cleanup competition, but I wasn't into it. None of us were. We stuck close together the whole day, and every time someone brought up hide and seek or mentioned the woods, we just kind of changed the subject. That night, we asked our counselor if the camp had ever had problems with people sneaking in. He gave us this confused look and said something like, "We've got fences and staff on rotation all night. Ain't nobody sneaking in here." Still, I couldn't shake it, because the voice that whispered to me didn't just sound weird, it sounded wrong, like too calm, too smooth, and the timing. It knew exactly where I was, not like someone guessing, like someone watching. After camp, We all went home, and life kind of moved on. I got my PS3 for Christmas that year, by the way. Played the hell out of Call of Duty 4 and Assassin's Creed. But even with all that distraction, that one night stuck with me. A few months later, Tino messaged us in IM about something weird. Said his uncle, who worked as a ranger on the lake near the summer camp, once told him about a kid named Matthew who disappeared back in the 90s. Said he went missing while hiking with his cousins. And the creepy part, the last place they saw him was near a wooden fence post by a dried-out creek bed. Max replied right away, saying he couldn't sleep after reading that. Derek said we were being dramatic, but I could tell he believed that too. We all knew it was too specific to just be coincidence. Even now, we still bring it up sometimes when we're together, mostly as a joke. Max will go, "Found you," in that creepy-ass whisper, and we all groan or throw stuff at him. But every time, it gets a little too quiet after the laugh. So, this happened back in August of 1999, right outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was 9 years old, and my parents were the kind of religious where every room in our house had a cross and some kind of Bible verse on the wall. We weren't just Sunday church people. We were Wednesday night, youth group, VBS, revival tent in the summer type people. Real old school Southern Christian vibes. That summer, our small church got invited to a 2-week Christian summer camp. It was part of a regional campout hosted by a coalition of evangelical churches in Oklahoma and northern Texas. These were pretty common back then, set up through local church associations and sometimes coordinated through places like Falls Creek or church camps listed in the Oklahoma Baptists network. The camp was meant to be both spiritual and wholesome. Morning devotionals, team-building relay races, scripture memorization contests, and nighttime worship services under string lights and pine trees. I didn't even want to go, to be honest. I was super shy, hated bugs, and the idea of porta potties and group prayers in the woods just didn't sound fun. But my sister, who was 10 at the time, was pumped. She was more outgoing and totally into the idea of singing songs, with hand motions and making crafts with scripture on them. My parents thought it would be good for us, said it would bring us closer to God and to give them 2 weeks of peace and quiet. So they both signed us up. We were dropped off at this medium-sized campground somewhere off a long gravel road about 45 minutes outside Tulsa. It was real remote. The camp had maybe 50 to 60 kids total, all spread across little wooden cabins that creaked when you walked. Boys on one side, girls on the other. Mess hall in the middle. One small chapel building where all the big lessons and praise sessions happened. The counselors were all older teens and young adults from the bigger churches, wearing shirts that said stuff like "Jesus is my lifeguard" and Camp Shield 1999. Safety rules were a big deal, and the one we heard about the most was the emergency bell system. Not whistles. This camp had these huge metal bells, about the size of a bowling ball, mounted on wooden posts next to the counselor cabins. You couldn't miss them. 1 ring was for a head count, 2 was for group gathering, and if the bell went off like crazy, that meant danger. Get to the chapel immediately and don't look back. They drilled that into us from day one. Every morning after breakfast, we'd do a mock run, just in case. They said it was mostly precaution, but you could tell they took it seriously. The first week of camp was mostly what you'd expect. Hiking, goofy skits about Bible stories, marshmallows by the fire, some cringy singing, and that thing where they make you write your sins on paper and nail it to a wooden cross. The usual youth camp stuff. I also made a few friends and got roasted alive by mosquitoes. And my sister? She was having a blast. But there was this one night, the first Sunday night actually, that sticks out more than anything else. Because that's when it started to get strange. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The bunks were sweaty and loud, and one of the girls above me kept tossing and turning in her sleep. At one point, she slammed her foot down so hard on my bunk it startled me fully awake. That's when I also heard the crunching outside. They were heavy steps, then a pause, then more steps, like someone was pacing back and forth behind our cabin. Not in a sneaky way either. It was slow, like they were thinking about something. I pulled the thin blanket over my head and tried to stay quiet. A few minutes later, I heard the steps stop, and then nothing. Out of nowhere, that bell started going off like crazy, loud, rapid, straight up panic mode. You just knew whoever hit it was freaking out. There's nothing more bone-chilling than hearing that bell clanking in the middle of the night when you're 9 years old and barely awake. And when it doesn't just ring once, but starts going wild, you know something is really wrong. The second I heard it, I sat up so fast I smacked my head on the bunk above me. The whole cabin jolted awake. Girls were groaning, sitting up, whispering, trying to figure out what was happening. We all knew what frantic rings meant. Danger, chapel, now. Our counselor, Miss Janice, flew in through the door still in her sweatpants and a huge oversized tee. She looked panicked, but was trying hard not to sound it. She then instructed us to get our shoes on, grab our flashlight, and head to the chapel. That was it. No more details. When we got outside, it was pitch black and colder than it had been all week. You could see flashlights bouncing through the trees as groups from the other cabins started heading toward the chapel from every direction. Some kids were crying. One girl had her sleeping bag wrapped around her like a cape. I stayed close to my sister the whole way, barely talking. Just kept looking over my shoulder at the tree line behind the cabins. I knew that's where the footsteps had been coming from earlier. When we got to the chapel, it was chaos. Everyone was jammed inside. Counselors were yelling over each other, trying to take roll calls. A few kids were huddled up crying. The camp director came up front with a megaphone and tried to get everyone quieted down. All he said was that someone had rung the bell, the one that was supposed to be mounted on a wooden post near the counselors' cabins. Said nobody was scheduled or instructed to ring it, and no counselors admitted doing it. He told us all to stay put inside the chapel and that a few staff were going to check the grounds. We sat there for over an hour. No singing, no praying, just sitting, whispering, and waiting. One of the girls said she thought she saw a man outside her cabin window. Another girl swore she heard breathing. The adults kept saying everything was fine, but their faces didn't match their voices. Eventually, the director came back and told us it was probably just a prank, that someone was maybe trying to be funny, and it went too far. He told us we'd all be sleeping in the chapel that night. That was the first and only time that happened in the camp's history. The next morning, we went back to our cabins and acted like we were just tired from the excitement. But everything felt on edge. At breakfast, one of the counselors tried to start a devotional and fumbled through the verses like she wasn't even reading them. That's when my sister leaned over and told me what she heard. See, because she was always hanging around the counselors, super outgoing, super chatty, she picked up more than she was supposed to. She said she overheard two of them talking outside the mess hall. The bell didn't ring from the wooden post near the cabins. It was rung from deep in the woods, because it had been stolen. Someone had hacked through the thick rope that tied it to the post. Not untied, not cut, but hacked. With an axe, and a big one. She said they saw the marks. Deep, splintered cuts in the post, like someone had taken a full swing. The bell had been dragged into the woods and rung from out there. That's why the counsellors freaked. That's why none of them admitted ringing it. Because they knew something, or someone took it. Later that morning, I saw a couple of the counsellors reattaching the bell to the wooden post. They didn't talk. They just worked fast, like they were trying not to think about it. And after what my sister told me, it all made sense. Realizing all of that messed me up. My stomach was knotted the whole day. My sister was quiet too, which for her was rare. She just stared off toward the woods every time we walked anywhere near them. The rest of the girls in our cabin got wind of it, and the mood shifted completely. No more games, no more goofing off. We kept checking the windows. Some girls started sleeping in their shoes. 2 nights after the bell incident, another girl in the mess hall overheard something. One of the counsellors had found the food storage room open, like broken into. The padlock had been popped, and inside it looked like someone had been sleeping there. There was a crumpled blanket, empty wrappers, even a pair of muddy socks shoved behind a shelf. It obviously wasn't meant to get out to the campers, but word travels fast. That girl told someone in our cabin, and by lunch, everyone in our building knew. After that incident, they brought in more adult leaders from the other churches. Said it was to help manage the last few days of camp, but it was pretty obvious something spooked the staff. One of the older girls told us she woke up around 2 a.m. and looked out the cabin window and saw flashlights. Not camp staff, but light torches from cops. She said it looked like 2 or 3 officers patrolling near the woods. No sirens, no cars, just walking, like they were trying not to be seen. We figured they only showed up once all of us were in bed, just to keep us calm, just to avoid panic. But it was already too late for that. We knew something was out there. The last few days of camp felt like we were just going through the motions. They kept the schedule as normal as possible. Songs, crafts, devotionals. But no one really cared anymore. Everyone was on edge. Even the campfires at night felt forced. The counselors were more like security guards than leaders. Always watching, always tense. I started noticing that some of the cabins were keeping their windows shut tight, even during the hottest afternoons. Kids stopped wandering around during free time, and we stuck to big groups. No one wanted to be alone, especially near the woods. One of the younger boys in a nearby cabin had a full-blown panic attack just from hearing the bell clang lightly in the wind one evening. They had to take him to the nurse's cabin, and I'm pretty sure his parents were called to come pick him up early. That's when it hit me. Whatever this was, it had gone way beyond a camp prank. Then, the last night of camp came. They tried to make it feel normal. Big group dinner, songs, everyone gets a participation ribbon. But you could tell nobody's heart was in it. I caught our counselor, Miss Janice, standing near the tree line by herself, just staring into the woods like she was waiting for something. Or someone. That night, before bed, one of the pastors gave a long prayer in the chapel, longer than usual, thanking God for safety, asking for protection over the journey home, and something about casting out darkness. I remember that line specifically because it made everyone shift uncomfortably in their seats. We didn't sleep much that night. Not really. even with the extra leaders and the silent flashlights pacing in the distance again. I could hear my sister whispering prayers under her breath in the bunk above me. I wanted to ask her if she thought whatever was out there was still watching us, but I didn't. I just closed my eyes and waited for morning. And morning did come, and nothing happened. At least, not out loud. But you could feel it, like we'd all held our breath and were finally exhaling. When our parents showed up to pick us up, the staff barely made eye contact. They smiled, waved, and said the usual "see you next year." But you could see it. They were relieved to send us off. In the van, ride home, my sister didn't talk much. Neither did I. It wasn't until we were halfway back that she finally said something. All she said was, "They never caught who it was." I asked her how she knew that, and she just shrugged. She said one of the adult leaders told another they found footprints going further into the woods, not back toward camp, like someone was living out there, or still is. We never went back to that camp again. Not just because of what happened, but because the next summer our church picked a new program. Something with a shorter drive and better facilities. Nobody talked about why. It's been years. I've been through scarier things since then. But nothing's ever unsettled me quite like that week. Because whoever or whatever rang that bell wasn't just trying to scare us. They wanted us to come out and find them. "12 years ago, I spent one of the weirdest summers of my life in Thailand. I was 14 back then, born and raised in the US, but my mom's side of the family is Thai. She grew up in the countryside before moving to the States, and every few years we'd visit her hometown, somewhere in the northeastern part of the country. You know the kind of place. Dirt roads, wooden houses on stilts, stray dogs just vibing in the sun. Real rural energy. That summer was supposed to be just another chill visit, except this time I wasn't going alone. My cousin Eric came with me. He's from my dad's side, 15 at the time, and basically my brother in everything. We grew up side by side, same birthdays, same hobbies, same almost got grounded stories. We'd never been to Thailand together, so this was supposed to be our big cousin trip. Just us two kids from the States hanging with our Thai relatives, soaking up the culture and eating mango sticky rice every day. The plan was to stay for 3 weeks, mostly in the countryside with my family. No fancy resorts, just small towns, temples, local markets, and the kind of humidity that makes your skin feel like it's melting off your bones. But honestly, it was fun. We rode motorbikes with our older Thai cousins, explored rice paddies, helped out during a Buddhist merit-making ceremony, and got low-key obsessed with Thai Fanta because it tasted way better than the US version. Everyone was super welcoming, but there was also this undercurrent of strict tradition. Like, our great-aunt wouldn't let us sleep with our feet pointing toward the altar in the living room. Our cousins told us not to whistle at night unless we wanted ghosts to visit. And whenever we passed a shrine or spirit house, we had to stop and do the Thai Y, you know, the Thai traditional little bowing with hands together like a prayer, give a little respectful nod, stuff like that. Superstition wasn't a joke out there. Even the adults who laughed about some of it still followed the rules. So fast forward about a week into our stay. One of our cousins tells us there's this small local summer campout happening in a clearing near a nearby village. Not a formal camp like in the US. More like a neighborhood teen thing. Some tents, a bonfire, people cooking on open flames, telling ghost stories, and playing games late into the night. We figured, why not? Eric was all about it. Said it sounded cooler than sitting around eating fried bananas and watching old Thai soap operas. That night started out pretty chill. Stars were out, fire crackling, bunch of kids our age just hanging around. Some of the local teens were surprisingly good at English, and we all hit it off fast. Not everyone could speak fluently. English isn't a main language in Thailand, but they could understand enough to keep up, and we had one of our Thai cousins, Beer, who was decent at translating when things got confusing. He bounced between groups, making sure no one was totally lost in translation. At some point, someone brought out grilled chicken skewers and passed them around, while people started telling scary stories. Most were the usual fare: white ladies, haunted roads, cursed dolls, typical urban legend vibes. But then another one of our cousins, I think it was Pan, leans in and says there's this weird old game that Thai kids used to play. Some kind of whispering game that's only played once per camp. Apparently, it had to be done in front of a specific tree, one that looked wrong and twisted, the kind that grows in the middle of nowhere and doesn't match the trees around it. According to them, it only worked if done after midnight, and you had to whisper a question into a hole in the trunk. Strictly no yelling, and just ask one question. Then you wait, and that's it. No follow-ups, no second chances. The answer would come in your dreams, or through signs. Honestly, I thought it sounded like folklore stuff they used to scare city kids. Eric didn't. He was already grinning and asking where the tree was. We should have said no. We should have just stuck to roasted chicken and bad ghost stories. But of course, we followed them into the woods anyway. The walk to the tree was weird from the start. Not creepy, but something wasn't right. Like the vibe had this weird pressure to it, and every time someone cracked a joke, it fell flat. There were about 8 of us, including Eric and me, plus our cousins and a few kids from the village. Beer, our translator/tour guide cousin, kept glancing at the kid leading us like he wasn't sure this was such a good idea anymore. The path wasn't marked. We walked maybe 15 minutes into the forest past the last tent, cutting through tall grass and banana trees until we reached this clearing. And there it was, the tree. It was huge and looked really old, real gnarled like its trunk had twisted in on itself. One thick branch stretched sideways like an arm pointing nowhere. At the base was this jagged opening, maybe from lightning, maybe not. But it looked exactly how Pan described it, just naturally messed up in a way that didn't sit right. Everyone got real quiet. No one really knew how the game started, but Pan lit a candle and stuck it in the dirt near the tree. He said you had to approach the hole one at a time, lean in, and whisper your question. No touching the tree, no laughing, no repeating. A couple of the village kids went first. Silly stuff. Will I be rich? Or who likes me? The usual teenage crap. Some whispered fast and backed away, like the tree might whisper back immediately. One kid waited a whole minute after asking his question, like he expected something to growl at him. Then it was Eric's turn. I was half expecting him to say something dumb like, "Will I ever get a girlfriend?" But no. He leaned in real slow, stayed still for a few seconds, then whispered. No one could hear what he said, not even me. When he stood back up, he had this tight little smile and just said, "Done." After he went, I decided nah, I wasn't doing it. Something about the night just felt weird, way too quiet, even for the woods. I was swatting mosquitoes just to break the silence. Luckily, nobody gave me crap for it. No chicken jokes, no calling me a buzzkill. They just let it be. We walked back in mostly silence too. I asked Eric what he said, and he just shrugged and said, "Just a dumb question." But something in his voice told me it wasn't dumb. He wasn't even making jokes like he normally would. We got back to the tents around 1 a.m. Most people had already crashed or were half asleep, but our group was still rattled. I tried staying up for a bit, but I eventually passed out. Then came the part I can't forget. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to this insane choking sound, like someone was gagging and couldn't catch their breath. For a second, I thought it was an animal outside, until I realized it was coming from inside our tent. It was Eric. He was on his side, curled up, wheezing like his throat was closing. His face was red, then purple. He was clutching at his neck, eyes bulging, like he couldn't pull air in. Beer shouted for help while I grabbed Eric and tried to sit him up, but it didn't help. He just kept clawing and gasping like he was drowning. At one point, he foamed a little. His lips went blue. I thought he was going to die right in front of us. And then just like that, it stopped, like flipping a switch. He passed out cold, not breathing heavy, not coughing, just unconscious. We were freaked out beyond belief. Some of the Thai teens were crying. Others just stared like they'd seen a ghost. I remember Pan stepping out of the tent and whispering something I couldn't understand to one of the older kids. It sounded like praying. Eric didn't wake up until sunrise, and even then, he acted like he barely remembered anything. Just said he was tired and had a weird dream. When Eric finally got up that morning, he looked like hell. Pale, puffy eyes, hair matted with sweat. Everyone was giving him space, even the Thai cousins who were usually super loud and clingy. He stretched like nothing happened, mumbled something about needing food, and started changing out of his soaked t-shirt. That's when one of the cousins, Jeeb, just froze, like eyes locked onto Eric's back and wouldn't move. I looked too. At first I thought it was just some red marks or bug bites, but no, there were actual scratches, thin, raised, and faintly red, like they'd scabbed over hours ago. They weren't random either. They curved and looped in ways that didn't look accidental. Jeeb called over Beer, who took one look and backed up a step. He said something quick in Thai, and I saw the other cousins' faces just go pale. I asked what it was, and Beer hesitated. Then he said something that still gives me chills to this day. He said it looked like a phrase in old Thai script, Lana, or maybe even Khmer-style lettering. Hard to read, but familiar to locals who'd grown up hearing old ghost stories. The translation, it read, Hao Gin Dek. In English, it means, hungry, eat the child. Eric just laughed, like an awkward brush it off kind of laugh. He said it was probably a prank someone pulled while he was knocked out. Maybe they wrote it on his back with something, or dragged a comb over his skin. Typical Eric trying to logic it away. But the rest of us weren't laughing, not even close, especially not the Thai cousins. Jeeb refused to go near him for the rest of the trip. Beer kept asking if he remembered anything from his dream, and when Eric kept saying he couldn't, Beer dropped it, but wouldn't stop looking at him like he expected something worse. Then Beer couldn't help himself. He straight up asked Eric what question he whispered to the tree. Eric scratched the back of his neck and gave this half smirk, half shrug, like he was trying to play it cool, but wasn't really pulling it off. And then he said, "When will I die?" The rest of our stay was weird, quiet. No more campouts, no more ghost stories. The family took us to a few temples and had monks bless us, burn incense, and tie white strings around our wrists. They didn't say why, but I could tell it had to do with what happened. Eric and I never really talked about it again. Once we got back to the States, it just became one of those casual travel stories that we left vague. If it came up, we'd just say Eric got sick or ate something weird, like an easy excuse. But I still remember the look on his face that night, the panic, the gasping, and I still remember those marks on his back. I swear they weren't human. He's still alive, by the way, living in Portland now, married, has a kid, seems happy, but he never jokes about death, ever. All right, we've reached the end of tonight's stories. I'll let the rain take over from here. Just relax, drift off, and get some rest. See you next time.